What's your take on that? That your fellow military members are the same people that are doing this to you?
This was 100% intentional. I mean, there's other cases. The reason they called us the MARSOC 7, because there were 7 people that I was one of them, that they were trying to run up the flagpole. But they had 2 other cases with 8 Marines from Hamdaniya, a case in Iraq, and Haditha, another case in Iraq. But those were also highly publicized cases as well. But in our case, they decided we're going to dispose of these guys by dogpiling on them with 45 criminal investigators. We're going to do P for plenty and blow them up. And we're going to, I mean, from one side of the life cycle, at the beginning of this case, to the other, they had this Major Codwalder, and then they had 4 primary attorneys. Even the legal advisor was biased towards the government's case. You had 6 government attorneys, trying to condemn. I mean, there was originally 7 of us, and then 2, myself and 1 other, were co-defendants during the 3.5-week trial. So when you put that many criminal investigators and attorneys, I mean, you're talking 7-to-1 odds, literally. I mean, there was originally 7 of us, and you're using that many investigators. And then you whittle it down to 2. So when you have 50 against 2 and 25, do you see some kind of agenda? Even one of the jury members, they call it panel members, he brought up so one of the NCIS investigators who took the stand, and he was talking, and he said, yeah, I came in here today. I've got a list of things that we feel are inconsistent with the Marines' statements. And this panel member, this jury member, had served as an enlisted Marine in legal services, and he saw the rank bias, and he said, did you create a list of the Afghans' inconsistent statements? He was like, because we've heard all the Marines testify, and maybe they saw something different from where they were sitting in the vehicles, but their sequence of events of, they drove into town, they got blown up, got shot at from the left, shot at from the right, they all, I mean, they're consistent. But he said, who ordered you to create this list of inconsistent statements? Because he said he was told to create this, but it shows, Justin, this was very biased. This was a top-down slam dunk. Let's hang these guys out to dry. Let's control the narrative so the media only gets what we want them to get, which again, that in and of itself is illegal. And Justin, you probably remember this, and I'm trying to compare apples to airplanes here, but go with me for a second. But at the same time, in the same state, I'm talking North Carolina, 2007, just down the road at Duke, they had these young preppy lacrosse players. I mean, these aren't Marines, they're not commandos, they didn't go to combat, but they're young, rich, preppy kids, and on the lacrosse team, went out to a strip club, found a gal, and they decided they'll pay her to do this, little strip tease act, and for the lacrosse team. And one thing led to another, and she claimed that she was raped, and it went to trial. And the prosecuting attorney, Michael Nifong, was disbarred and punished because he withheld state's evidence that did exonerate these guys. But in the American people were outraged that a prosecuting attorney could withhold evidence that could have sent these guys into prison. But when you read this book and you see one after another, I mean, to threaten to deport someone's mother unless he signed what NCIS concocted. They manufactured the statement that said the 7 of us fired wildly. The Marines were out of control. That fit their NCIS narrative because they wanted a win. So that's the kind of pressure. I mean, you don't just decide, hey, Justin, check this out, JC. We're gonna freelance here, and I want to get this big. I mean, you don't do something like that unless you have a get out of jail free card. Unless somebody above, and you're just the messenger doing the dirty work. But the American military is not a mob. It's not like a bunch of gangsters that have Al Capone handing somebody a wrench or a bat and saying, hey, take this guy out. So notice the title, A Few Bad Men. The Marine Corps is a great organization. I mean, any organization that's founded in a bar we're the actual bar owners
Yep.
bribing people by getting them drunk, telling them, hey, we're going to fight the most powerful, most lethal force in the world. We're going to kick their ass and we're going to win. That's a good organization, like, convincing people like, hey, you're going to be fighters. I'm going to have you're going to be on a ship and you're going to swing across that ship and you're going to use a sword and, spear these guys and kill. I mean, those were some real warriors back then. And that's a real warfighting organization and it continues. But when you have it infected with a cancer of a few bad men, I mean, everybody knows, General Amos here, later in court after he retired, they determined that the U.S. Navy Marine Corps Court of Appeals that there was substantial evidence in the case against these where he was ordering the convening authority then at that time because they changed it, but Lieutenant General Waldhauser made a sworn statement that he was told by General Amos, who was the commandant at that time, that he wanted those Marines crushed that had the snipers who had urinated on the dead bodies of the Taliban. And the court determined that there was substantial evidence that supported that case against General Amos for unlawful command influence. But we have a two-tier justice system, Justin, different spanks for different ranks, and that's the mortal sin of the military is when you have hypocrisy. And we both wore stripes in uniform, served at those ranks, and when you see some, especially an officer, say something, and be emphatic about it, this is how it's going to be, and then you see him doing, the exact opposite and really going overboard doing the exact opposite. You're like, what kind of credibility? And it really puts a horrible taste in your mouth that, this is not what the military is a good organization. You just have bad members, and oftentimes they're never held accountable. Oftentimes they make their careers, as you see in this case, it's in one way it's comparable. I'm not trying to say we were like Julius Caesar, but when you talk about few, I'd say that's debatable because in this book, just like with Julius Caesar, it wasn't just Brutus that stabbed him. It was all 60 senators. I mean, this book, people made their careers and it went like a hockey stick. These guys' careers went exponentially north, vertical at an accelerated rate because they did what their bosses wanted. They rewarded them for smashing our heads with the bat, throwing us under the bus. You can go on Military Times and Google search Colonel John Nicholson and put it in Military Times and read one of these articles in the 5-part series that Andy D. Grand Prix did and go down and look at the video link that Colonel Nicholson slams and condemns us in a press conference and then says from his base in Afghanistan, he's televising this to a Pentagon press conference and says, yes, these Marines, this was a terrible, terrible mistake, a stain on our honor. He apologized on behalf of the United States government. And then he says, yes, and we're facilitating Naval Criminal Investigation Service, which is here at their base in Jalalabad, and he is facilitating their investigation. So during an ongoing investigation, how does a colonel get away with, destroying our rights as far as a presumption of innocence? And people say, well, as a military, you give up you never give up the presumption of innocence. And it's a well-known fact that you have to prove your innocence, which is that's not constitutional. You don't ever give up your presumption of innocence. But what happened to Colonel Nicholson? Well, he got promoted all the way up to 4 stars. It's a fact. And he retired as a 4-star general. Nothing happened to him except he just got promoted in an accelerated way. He got, put in the key billets. If you do the dirty work of the mobsters, Capone and all these dirty guys, they rewarded them. And so it'll spin your head. It'll blow your mind. There's so many things in here. And this is backed up by sworn testimony. So when you read this, this is Colonel Nicholson on the witness stand. And that's another thing. As you know, the Security Classification Guide prohibits people from classifying anything for the purpose of saving someone from embarrassment. But this was a gun battle. I mean, we're not talking the locations of submarines at sea or the orbit satellites or Jason Bourne's knock list. This is guys that shot at some Taliban shooting AK-47s and sniper rifles and blowing us up with homemade explosives. Nothing high speed and technical here. That we went to federal court and we said, we're going to sue you unless we've put in the Freedom of Information Act. And either you release that or we're going to continue to bring this up in court, and this is all going to get out in the public space. So after 11 years, there are some things which I still don't have. I've narrowed it down to one sentence. That's all. I mean, I still have a ton of stuff that I asked for, which they've said no. But since 2018, I've asked for just give me this one sentence. And they say they have it, but they have not given it up. And their constant responses, we're busy. Well, it's 2022, Justin. I mean,
they're basically refusing to unclassify it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, that one sentence. But, you read this book and you see all this other stuff and you're like, why did they classify any of this? And, the readers will read, this is the first time I'm hearing. I mean, this has been publicized and we've gotten our side of the story out, but this is the first time that all of this in one location. And the point of the whole book is this type of malfeasance affects more American citizens than any other employer in the United States. Until just recently, if you stacked Amazon and Walmart's number of employees up together, you would still be short of the active duty, reserve, contractors, and civilian in the United States Department of Defense. But Amazon can't put you on bread and water, and Walmart can't sentence you to death. The max punishment for murder, just like that nut job former Major Hassan Nadal just went on that shooting spree down in Fort Hood, he was sentenced to death, and eventually they will kill him. And when you murder innocent people, like we were falsely accused of, those are the consequences. So, but when your government tries to illegally and unethically prove some false narrative and spin the truth on the American people, we have no tolerance for that. And I know this book is like radioactive. This explains where all the bodies are buried.